Welcome to HDSI's first Alumni Spotlight of the 2024-25 year. My name is Kelly Jensen, and I'm in charge of Career Services and Alumni Relations for HDSI. So I have the pleasure of working closely with both our students and alumni. And as I provide you with some of today's details, I'd like for you to start by introducing yourselves in the chat and sharing your major, your year or date of graduation, place of employment if you have one, or any other interesting details you might like to add, share with the group. This will help us get the networking and conversation started. This HDSI alumni series was started about 2 years ago to support both students and alumni who wanted more opportunities to connect, network, and learn from each other. Alumni Spotlight events generally alternate between virtual and in-person so that we can provide space for those who are both local to San Diego, as well as those who may be living in other areas of the world, like our guest tonight, who's over on this coast. Through this series, you'll have opportunities to meet some incredible professionals in the field of data science who will share their unique stories, challenges, and tips for success, along with other career-related topics. Today's presenter graduated from UCSD HDSI in 2023, but he has decided to pursue his PhD, and you'll get to hear what led him in that direction. You're welcome to ask questions, make comments, and have conversations in the chat throughout the event, and there will be plenty of time for Q&A and discussion following the presentation. Now, I'd like to turn it over to our guest of honor, Karthik. Guruvayurappan. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks for the great introduction, and thanks for having me, and thanks to all of you for showing up. It's really awesome to just see people interested in learning more. So I did prepare some slides, but yeah, I was hoping to, for the most part, have a kind of informal discussion and really have more questions. I think that would be kind of way more fun for both me and maybe hopefully more helpful for all of you watching. But I did prepare some brief slides to also kind of navigate the discussion. Today, I was hoping to talk a bit about navigating uncertainty in undergrad. And I think for me personally, this was a big thing that I experienced as an undergrad, was just not knowing what I was doing. And so I hope to share what my experience was like, and hopefully provide guidance or some sort of, I guess, stories that might help you with these same things that I think a lot of us experience. So a little bit about myself. So as Kelly mentioned, I graduated from HDSI in 2023. I did a double major in data science and biology. And so I'm also happy to talk a little bit more about that later. And then there's the picture of beautiful San Diego. And while I was at UCSD, I also did undergraduate research at the Salk Institute, which is just across the street from UCSD. And I spent a little over 3 years working in the McVicker lab at the Salk Institute. And so that was where I got my first exposure to bioinformatics research. And then now I'm a second-year PhD student in what's a bit of a mouthful, which is the Tri-Institutional Computational Biology and Medicine program, which is in New York City for the most part. And so what this is it's actually a kind of a joint PhD program between 3 schools, Cornell, which has a medical college in New York City, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and Rockefeller University, as well as Cornell and Ithaca. And I'm personally working at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center doing computational biology research and trying to get my PhD. And so now that was the kind of work side of me, but I am also a human. And so I enjoy having fun. And so for fun, I really, in college, I played a lot of tennis. And so I was actually on the club tennis team at UCSD. This is a picture of the whole team now 3 years ago. And then I also run, especially now, a lot more. So I've been running around New York City this is a picture of me after the Staten Island half marathon, which was just this past month. And then I also watch a lot of sports. So I'm a huge 49ers fan since I'm from the Bay Area, but I also watch a lot of basketball and also watch a lot of tennis since I grew up playing tennis. And then lastly, I enjoy just trying a bunch of restaurants around New York City. I think it has some of the best food in the world. And so here's a picture of me trying a newly opened restaurant just outside my workplace. So yeah, but maybe I'll take some time to kind of just look through the chat and just read. So I see Guoxuan, junior data science student. Nice to see data science majors making it out. Passionate about the entire data analytical process and just finished an internship interview today. Oh, I hope that went well. Yeah, but no, I mean, it's great to even just be in that process. And then I see Sahana, junior majoring in molecular and cell biology, minoring in data science. So that's very similar to me. And then I guess, yeah, would like to pursue a PhD and then been doing undergraduate research in the Ren lab. I think that's Bing Ren's lab. So that's cool. That is someone who I've come across in my research endeavors. I see Trevon, senior data science student interested in machine learning and bio. So another great to see people interested in kind of the intersection of ML and bio. And then I see Kirtana, first year master's student in data science. Yeah, and excited to learn about my experience. I hope this can be insightful. Here we go. So I guess my main take home message is that, I think it's easy when you see other people, you see kind of the highlights of their life, and you hear about all the great things that they've accomplished, and then you think about, at least for me, my experience has been that I've thought about my own life and I've thought about, this is such a mess. Like everything is just such a mess. Nothing seems to work. Everything is just going all over the place, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And so here's just, for instance, I think like if you look 2 slides ago to the story that I just shared about, doing research in Salk Institute and doing a double major and then coming to my PhD, it looks all great. But actually every year of my undergrad, I had things that were just, I had no idea what I was doing. And so, for instance, in my first year, when I first came in, I was a data science major and I had no idea. I mean, people were talking about subject domains and applying your data science to different subject domains. And for me, I didn't know if I liked economics more or if I liked biology more. And so that was a big thing, especially for my first 2 quarters, that I wasn't sure about. And I'm happy to share more stories there. And then after that, it came to finding a research opportunity, which was another great thing that took a lot of time and had a lot of twists and turns. In my second year, I was wondering what type of research I want to do, how I'm going to try to pursue a double major in biology. In my third year, I was contemplating whether I should pursue a PhD, and if so, when would be the right time to do that? Do I just go right after undergrad? And finally, in my fourth year, it became a battle of trying to manage applying to graduate school and also attending courses, and that was a complete mess in my life. And so I guess now I'll just take a moment. So now I've just like briefly mentioned like 10 different topics of things that can come up, and so I'm happy now to take any sort of questions that, I mean, I really hope to have more of a discussion than me just talking at you. So yeah, does anyone have any questions about these sorts of topics or any other related topics? I'm happy to kind of chat more.
You're also free to unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask a question. Could you tell us more about what you worked on at the Salk Institute?
Yeah. So when I came into undergrad in 2019, I think machine learning was really, really like a hot topic. And then I basically was kind of interested in seeing if machine learning could be applied in a biological context. And so then I actually started looking for labs that were doing kind of things in that space, and I was really interested in specifically genetics. And so I ended up joining the McVicker lab, which is a genetics lab. And so what they do is, in the lab in general, is they kind of make statistical computational methods to understand human genetics. So basically to understand how our DNA affects various aspects of our health and our biology. And so I was specifically doing research. So there are specific biological experiments where we can essentially perturb different parts of our DNA and find out what they do. And so I was building computational methods to analyze these perturbation experiments and try to extract some sort of a biological insight from them. And so, yeah, that was the high level of what I did.
We have one more comment in the chat. Could you also talk more about your experience with merging data science and bio and how navigating that space was, what that meant with the process of applying to grad school? And I'll add on to that too. Why did you, if you could talk a little bit about why you decided to go for a PhD after you graduated versus a master's degree?
Totally. So I think actually I'll go kind of chronologically and start from how I navigated the space of kind of applying data science and bio. And so when I came in freshman year, I came in as a data science major, and so I knew that data science was something that I wanted to do. So I knew I really enjoyed statistics. I kind of liked programming, and I really wanted to do something that was kind of joining those two things. And this was just about when data science was picking up. And so I was very keen on doing data science. And then after that, it became a question of, okay, how can I apply this now to biology? And actually, the interesting thing is that happens in many different flavors. Yeah, I guess in terms of navigating it, I knew there were certain biological topics that I was interested in, but I actually didn't fixate myself on a particular biological topic. I just started applying to different labs around UCSD that were doing research that was just anything biology related and anything data science related. So the story is actually on the data science newsletter. There was a job posting for another lab at the Salk Institute, and that lab was looking for a data science kind of researcher, and they were actually studying the circadian rhythm. And so then I actually applied to that lab first. I didn't end up getting that position, but then that kind of put me on the rabbit hole of finding this more genetics related lab, also kind of data science-y statistical research. And so then I applied there, and then I ended up meeting Graham McVicker, who runs the lab that I worked in, and then it ended up kind of working out, and I ended up finding research that way. In terms of actually kind of navigating that space, so coming in, that lab was a statistical genetics lab, and so they were doing programming related to genetics. And so that was kind of how I started to get in there. I guess in terms of courses, I didn't really see that happening because my first year, the courses were kind of separated. So I would take biology courses or chemistry courses, and then I would take data science courses. And those two things actually happened completely parallel to each other. And then it was only starting around my third year where I started to take these kind of interdisciplinary courses. Like, for instance, I took one of the courses in the bioengineering department called Applied Genomics Technologies. And that was at the intersection of data science and bio. And so that was when I started to really see the intersection happen. And so for the first part, it was a little bit like kind of being a fish out of the water and not knowing what was going on. And then I guess even coming into the lab, I mentioned I was first interested in machine learning, and the lab was actually doing statistical genetics, which was something that was a little bit distant from machine learning. But then what ended up happening was just by kind of picking up skills in that area, I slowly started to explore more and more topics, and slowly just started to actually start to like it more that way. And so I ended up liking it more by doing, as opposed to being fixated on a particular topic. And then after that, I will say the other thing I think is I was in a really supportive environment in my undergraduate research lab, and that was a huge contributor to me being able to succeed and explore the intersection there, because I will say it took me like a year and a half until I felt like I really, started to understand what I was actually doing at the intersection of the space, because it's a really, really complicated space. And it took a lot of persistence, time, patience, both from me, but then also from the people mentoring me, because, I definitely was not as productive as other researchers would, because, I was a first year and second year undergraduate student. And so I owe tremendous thanks to the lab for kind of taking a chance on me, got more and more into it. And then I guess kind of now looking at why I did a PhD was basically, I think, by the end of my second year, I tried applying for internships and seeing if industry would be an option in the space of computational biology. And I applied to a couple of places, got a couple of coding interviews and things like this. But then there was actually one interviewer who took some extra time afterward to give me some career feedback, which was very, very nice of him. And he actually recommended, that I take time to really do my own research project. And he even potentially suggested doing a PhD. And then also being in research and kind of seeing everyone else around you, I think I started to realize that a PhD was what was required to really gain the kind of depth of expertise in computational biology. And so that's what pushed me in that direction. Since if I wanted to impact the field, I realized that I had to kind of lead my own research and do my own research project. And that was what led me to the PhD. Kind of a long-winded answer. I see another question in the chat.
Oh, sorry, I was reading it and I was muted.
It's
difficult for me to get into labs working on biological data science without an educational background in biology. I've been looking into labs at Salk Institute, working on data science related research.
I think the key to being successful in any research domain, whether that be biological data science or another one, is to really just be persistent and patient. So for instance, for me, for my first 2 years of college, because of the way that course requirements worked out, I didn't actually I only took one biology class. And so even when I was doing all this biological data science research, I didn't really have a background in biology in college. And so my advice would be that I think it's definitely very possible. I think it's more about just kind of immersing yourself in the lab and staying patient and persistent with it, and just trying and really embracing how difficult it might be at times. But I think just appreciating the process would be my advice. Yeah. So I also have some more topics that I've prepared. So these are things that I constantly felt like I was having uncertainty with as an undergrad. And so one of them is definitely imposter syndrome. I think this is something that affects everybody. It affected me especially. The second one is quote unquote productivity, which I can elaborate on if it's of interest. And the third is like I mentioned earlier, is prioritizing supportive environments. I think maybe what I'll do, since there's no questions, is I'll just give like brief stories to go along with each of these. So I think the first one is imposter syndrome. I think it can really feel a lot of the time like everyone around you is doing a lot of things that are really crazy and this and that and everything. But I think my my take on it, having now made it to the PhD program, is that I think everyone still feels that way. So whenever I talk to all my friends, they also feel the same way, which is that it feels like everyone around them is doing all these things, and then you're sitting there and you're really struggling. And so I think it's a very normal thing to have this kind of imposter syndrome. I think everyone has it, and I don't think it kind of ever goes away. I also think that I also think that now, kind of going into the next point, which is that I put quote unquote productivity. I think there's kind of a lot of dialogue around kind of being very productive and like maximizing every minute of every day and everything like that. But I will say that there is also something to be said about just embracing the process. And so I think that the most productive moments of my undergrad were the moments when I was probably sitting in the lab for like literally 4 hours. I wasn't able to get anything to work. I was breaking pretty much everything that I was doing. None of my code was working. I was sitting there puzzled. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm probably doing something that's completely wrong and unnecessary. But that's actually the process where you're learning the most. And so I think if you ever find yourself in that uncomfortable situation where it doesn't feel as nice as hitting the submit button on an assignment on Canvas, I think it's great to kind of embrace that, because I think that's where the real growth has happened, at least for me as a researcher. And now looking at it 4 or 5 years later, those were the periods where I learned what has now become like second nature for me and things that I know incredibly well. And so I would encourage folks to kind of embrace that process of learning and really treat it like, don't be hard on yourself for the fact that, maybe less stuff got done, and really think of it as like, oh, you put productive cycles into trying to learn something. And then the final thing is, prioritizing supportive environments. So like I was alluding to earlier, I think, the reason why I was kind of pushed towards pursuing a PhD and also was able to kind of do undergraduate research at a fair level at UCSD was because I was in a really supportive lab environment. And it really does take a lot of patience from those around you, and because as a first and second year undergraduate, you're not going to know as much as people who have been doing it for decades, and so it really does take a village to raise a child. They say it takes a village to raise a scientist. I think it's the same thing. I think if you can find environments where you can really make a difference, and stay committed and persistent, I think those are really great. Yeah, I guess, yeah. And I will say, I also felt a lot of pressure to kind of do like 10 different things at once in my undergrad. I think every undergrad probably feels this of like, I need to do 10 different things, and I need to show that I can do this and I can do that and I can do this project and that project. And ultimately, I think, I looked in preparing for this, I looked back at all those things that I did, and none of them panned out to anything. And really like all like just this one thing has turned into so much more. And so I would say that it really does take a lot of time and cycles to get somewhere. And so I would just, I would maybe put a little bit less emphasis on doing 10 things and just try to do maybe one thing, and just dedicate your whole self to that one thing and see what happens.
I love that story. I think it's so important to explore options because you don't know where life is going to take you, and you don't know where your interests are going to develop until you actually try something. I get a lot of students asking, who are interested in doing research, what kind of advice do you have for students who maybe don't know where to start with that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess, I'll tell you how I got started maybe, and that will shed some light. But I think my advice would be that, just start trying, and maybe even start small. So I think, there's a lot of kind of great online courses and resources which will have like data sets and things that you can start trying. And if you see something that potentially interests you, then don't be afraid to reach out to a professor or something, and then eventually someone somewhere will kind of start to point you in the right direction. So for instance, now I'll share my personal stories. I guess, when I first came in, like I said, I didn't know between data science or between biology and economics. And so what I did was I started in my first year, I even took some econ classes. And then I also joined this like investment committee at UCSD. And then while that was happening, I also I started working with this. There was actually, I think this was also maybe in the data science newsletter, there was a little posting for like a sports data science position, and I really enjoyed sports. And so I actually went and tried doing sports data science for a little while. We ended up actually applying a proposal for the undergraduate scholarship, and then we ended up getting it. And that was actually like the first research thing that I did. And then I was not very good at doing research back then. I still don't think I am very good at doing research. But it was a start. And so I would say that, just get started with something would be my advice. However small, however minor, just get started with something. And in the process of really just throwing yourself all into something, you're gonna find something else comes out of it. And so, after doing the tennis research, I did some brief tennis data science research. Um, I realized that, I was kind of interested in certain aspects of it, but then certain aspects were also like, a little more challenging. And then I also realized that I still was more interested in kind of just doing like genetics, like kind of more basic biology things. And so but it was still a very valuable experience to just go and try that and then not be that good at it, but still get something out of it. So I did that. Then I think, you know, I I think in my second year, I became once again more interested in machine learning, and so I did the undergraduate scholarship again. This time we did like a generative adversarial network, working with like album cover artwork, which I think was an idea that I had with my someone who I was living next to over COVID. And actually now he's also a PhD student, which is really funny, but he's doing something also completely different from generative adversarial networks, and I'm doing something completely different from generative adversarial networks. But we tried that. We weren't the greatest at doing, album cover artwork, but we tried it and we turned something out of it. But I think, those experiences of just throwing yourself at something and seeing what kind of things you can do is would be my advice. And then slowly what will happen is, as you do that, you will see the path will become clearer and clearer and clearer, and then eventually, hopefully, it'll all be okay.
Sahana, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us so many insights. I actually attended one of Dr. McVicker's talks and saw your work there about CRISPR perturbations, and I'm
Oh,
really
that's
interested in
cool.
epigenetics. So that's how like the name rang a bell. But I was wondering, like as an undergrad, um, how did you, contribute to research that was like for me at least, like yeah, you learn a lot from lab and you're able to contribute a lot, but how do you get autonomy over a part of a project and like really contribute in a way where you're bringing something novel to it? Is it a gradual process? Like you just stick with it and stay patient, and just some insight into that because I think it can be a little intimidating and it's definitely like an ocean of knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I guess, I'll share how it went for me. So when I first joined, I knew nothing. I didn't even know how to use, like, I think a lot of code that we write was in R, the R programming language. And my first year when I joined the lab, I didn't even know how to use R. So the first year and a half in the lab, um, I was just actually working under a PhD student and kind of just really just like tuning hyperparameters and running a method that the PhD student had written. And then I was helping kind of tune it and improve that. And so then eventually we actually, that was eventually integrated into like a larger paper that came out of the lab now a year ago. But yeah, so that was how I started, which was first I was just basically like just running scripts and kind of tuning hyperparameters, not really having, I didn't really have autonomy, but also I don't think I should have had autonomy because I hardly could like put two and two together as to what I was actually doing. And then slowly, very slowly, like over the span of a year, I started to understand more and more and more of what I was doing. And I would say that, I think there's something to be said about, it's like if you can just if you just do kind of, if you have a certain task that you're kind of told to do, if you just do that task, but then really try to understand and go a little bit above and a little bit above, and if you just consistently do that over a long period, I think you'll slowly start to see the autonomy appear. So then what happened was, as I was writing those scripts and writing those and tuning the hyperparameters, I slowly started to see little places where I could contribute a little more and a little more and a little more. And then eventually that turned into a little more, a little more, a little more. And then once that project kind of wrapped up, then there came along a second project, which I got to kind of like have a little bit more in. And then I started to take my own little directions on it here and there. And then working on that project for another, I think I started that project in the summer of after my second year. And just last month, it got published. So, this is like 3 years of gradually becoming more and more and more autonomous, and then finally now it's like I fully can understand every single sentence, every single figure in that paper.
first of all, it's nice to meet you. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Mariana. I am a last year data science major here at HDSI. I just have a quick question about the research. How did you get used to like writing? How did you like catch up with like the lab generating their own research and keeping up with like the drafts and the deadlines for the manuscripts? Like, is there like any resources on campus that you were like directed to for that, or did you learn by yourself? Um, I just
Is
want to
it
know a
is
little
it
bit more
for
about it.
writing or?
For like writing your research. So
For the most part, I mean, when early on, especially, I was not really involved with writing, and then I think towards the end, what started to happen was I started to get more and more involved with writing. Um, I guess the way that happened for me was, so there's actually a couple of scholarships and things that you can apply to as an undergraduate. So for instance, I applied to the Goldwater scholarship. I didn't get it. But it was still a good exercise because as part of the Goldwater scholarship, you actually have to write like a 3-page research proposal, and a personal statement. And so that was a good kind of writing experience. And then I guess in terms of writing in the lab also, so then kind of after the Goldwater scholarship, I also applied for, like, for instance, there's this NSF graduate fellowship, which I applied for in my senior year of undergrad. I didn't end up getting that either, but my writing was not very good in undergraduate as I started, but then it kind of slowly got better. I think I got a lot of support from my lab. So my lab had a lot of people who would give me feedback on my writing and improve it. And then I also was lucky enough to be able to get feedback from my mentor. So that was amazing. And so yeah, I would say, like, and then in terms of manuscript writing, I think only recently now, with this paper that I've been leading more so, I've gotten involved with the writing process. So I would say, like, it kind of comes over time. I think there's like different opportunities that will present themselves. So for instance, the Goldwater scholarship will be like first, then I applied for summer research programs. So I did a summer research program at UCLA, and for that for that summer, I submitted like 7 different applications to different institutions and their summer programs. And so that was a lot of personal statement writing, which I think really helped when it came time to actually apply to graduate school and apply for the graduate fellowship and everything. And I didn't get the graduate fellowship, but I did get into graduate school. So I wrote like 7 or 8 personal statements there, and then now in graduate school, I've also been now more involved with the writing of the manuscript, and then the manuscript that I was more of a, like, I was kind of leading as an undergrad, and then also now getting more involved with different writing. But I think it comes gradually as you progress. Yeah, I hope that helps.
it does. Thank you. Also, I don't know if this has been answered before, but why did you like pursue a PhD instead of a master's? Or is there something specific from the program that you're attending right now that like that really pull you into like really applying for it? Like what was like your priority for like heading into grad school?
I think for me, the decision to pursue the PhD, I think just after experiencing what research is like in computational biology, I think it quickly became very apparent to me that everyone around me has a PhD, and in order to kind of lead research and make innovation in this space, it would also be necessary for me to go through the process of getting a PhD in kind of computational biology, because the field is so new, it's very interdisciplinary. So you kind of need to have an understanding of both biology and like statistics and programming and all this. And so there's a lot of skills that are required for success. Um, and so I think just seeing those around me have PhDs made me realize that this is something that I want to do. This is something that I can do. And that was what pushed me towards doing. And then I also, I mean, I talked to my advisor, but then I also talked to, like, the professor of one of my classes. And I think he told me, like, if you want to pursue a PhD, you should just go for it, and just go for it right away. And so one other piece of advice that I received was, if you kind of know that a PhD is something that you want to do, then you can just go for it as soon as possible. and just try to get it, because it's tough to pursue a PhD. And so if you're in the position to pursue it, I just send it at that moment. So yeah.
Thank you so much. So it was pretty intuitive, I guess, since you were passionate about research already. But yeah, thank you. That's enlightening. Another quick question, sorry, is that would you say that a student with less than 3 years of research experience can still apply for a PhD, or do you think we should like prioritize getting into a lab maybe for a few more years before trying to get into a PhD program?
That's actually a great question. So I mean, in my program at least, and in my experience, it's about half of PhD students actually take time in between undergrad and their PhD to kind of do other things. And so some of them will have worked as software engineers, others will have worked in industry and like different maybe biotech companies. Some people work in consulting, other, and so there's just all kinds of different backgrounds that are there. I would say that, I think now in order to get into PhD programs, it's kind of becoming the norm to have done some substantial amount of undergraduate research. I don't think it necessarily has to be 3 years. I don't think that that's like the magic number, but I think it is becoming common to before you apply for the PhD to kind of show and demonstrated that you want to do research, that you can do research. And so it's usually common for kind of many students now to have co-author publications. So like just publications where they're listed as one of the authors, not necessarily the first author. And so I would say that that's kind of the norm. And so sometimes, I mean, there are students who like, they maybe like they didn't do research during their undergraduate, but then afterward they worked as like a research technician in a lab for a couple of years, got on a lot of different papers and different projects, and then after that applied to graduate school. And so I think it's really like, it really comes down to like a case by case basis. But I think it's definitely possible to pursue a PhD. I think just showing that demonstrated interest and kind of passion for research. So I've covered briefly the economics versus biology. I covered kind of finding a research opportunity and how that went for me. I think what research do I want to do? I think that was another question that popped up in my mind. Was like, I was thinking, because I wasn't exactly sure exactly what I wanted to do. I would say that as an undergraduate, I wouldn't attach any importance to the topic of research that you do, because you can always change it later on, and it's not like you're kind of stuck with that topic for life. So my advice would be to just, once again, like I said, just really immerse yourself into that, into any topic, and then navigate your way from there. And then the other kind of thing that other piece of advice that I got actually from a PhD student when I was an undergraduate was, also just go around and attend different seminars and just see, different things, and maybe something will click with you, maybe something won't. You never know. It's life has its beautiful way of kind of twisting and turning, and just let it do its thing. I think there's no point in trying to like mastermind it too much. I think just go with the flow. Talked a little bit about double majoring in biology. Happy to chat more about that as well. Should I pursue a PhD? I think I chatted a bit about, and then also when to pursue a PhD. Yeah, and then managing applying to graduate school, I talked a little bit about, but I see a question. Yes.
Oh, not on that slide, I guess, but just outside of that in general. I know that you are a data science person, but I think there was also a few slots in here, and this might be more partly for the advisors, but there were a few slots here for like the cognitive science people also interested in data science. And I was just curious if you had any advice on how to further pursue things. Like, what sort of things do you learn from, what sort of things do you replicate in your research that you learned in your studies beforehand? Because I'm already in like sort of data science focused research to some extent, or at least making my research roll into that of more managing the data, cleaning and all that. But do you have any suggestions for how to further sort of engage in and learn about data science without taking the through research, without actually taking the classes, or like what sort of things you can do to get experience that you would otherwise be getting through your classes in the data science major. Because I really liked data science right before the start of my third year when I didn't have enough time to transfer into the data science major or like apply for that or anything. But I still see that there's a lot of data science you can learn without having a data science major, because that's what people used to do for many years before the data science major existed. And like, we still have an interesting data science program that has probably insights that I could learn and copy from for other reasons.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great question. I think that generally kind of translates to like, how do you learn skills where courses don't teach those skills? Because that, I mean, regardless of how many ever classes you take, it will never be enough. You will never have all the skills. And so I think the example that I gave earlier was like, the lab that I joined as a first year, that lab was coding entirely in R. And they don't teach R in the data science classes. And so I had no idea. I think, I think the internet is this kind of amazing place where you can slowly pick up things. I think especially now with, I mean, I wouldn't be afraid to just kind of, use ChatGPT, use all those different things. I think the other thing that really does help is just talking to different people. So just be shameless about asking for help. I think, I definitely pestered everybody in the lab around me with like, I mean, they probably thought these were like stupid questions, but then like, I have like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I would just go to them. I'd be like, hey, just tell me how you're doing this. Or like, how do you do that? Or how do you do this? And just be shameless about asking for help, and don't be kind of afraid to do that. I think there is like a thing of like, oh, I don't want to seem like I'm, asking a bad question, or like I don't know what I'm doing. But I would just be shameless about it. Just be like, I don't know what I'm doing. Please just like help me. And yeah, I mean, I think you can apply that in the research setting. I think you can apply that outside of it too.
On the flip side of that, what sort of things do you think that you've learned from your data science major that have been the most helpful for you outside of the class that you learned them in? Or what do you think are the most important things that your major actually taught you in your time here that you've taken on to your research?
Yeah, no, I will say that this is the one thing I love to say about the data science major is I feel like in talking to all of my friends who have graduated from UCSD, I feel like the data science major does the most to prepare you for kind of real world applications. So I think like, for instance, DSC 80, I think there's probably some people listening who have taken that class. That class is a lot of work. But that class has been one of the most useful things, because now in my research, I'm looking at data frames, really large data frames, and I can do pretty much anything I want with pandas without using even ChatGPT. I can just I just know it. It's like a second language that I know. And so that has been tremendous. I think, there's also some other classes where, you might not see them in the moment, but they kind of come later. So for instance, I think DSC 102 is another really, really great class where you learn how to use scalable computing systems. I think I have a bunch of friends message me now. Did you have a class where they taught you how to use like a large compute system? Because they don't have that in other majors, and they have that in HDSI. And so I think probably those two, I would say, were the most useful. I will also go on a bit of a tangent, which is that with the biology major, and then also a little bit of flexibility from the data science major, I started to really find these kind of niche courses at UCSD that were really specifically what I wanted to do. And so that might be another way to get skills that you might not see coming in your coursework. So for instance, I took a class on gene regulation specifically, which was really niche to what I wanted to study. And I found it, and then I petitioned it as a data science elective. And so I would say to try to, bend barriers and things and try to see if you can learn that way too.
That makes sense. So it's like big data, so basically big data computing type things, big data frames, big scalable things. That sort of stuff has been the most important, involved, and applicable skill that you've learned from your major. And besides that, a lot of really specific niche classes are the best way to find things that you might not need to know about. And that's probably, and on another point, what do you think's is that also the hardest stuff that you've learned from your major that would be harder to learn elsewhere? Or what do you think had been like, other than that, what do you think had been the hardest things to learn if you didn't learn them in the class that you'd specifically learned them in?
Yeah, the hardest things to learn outside of that's actually that's a good question. I'd say I would say that, there is a thing of, it does become harder to piece these things together when you don't have the community of learners around you. And so I would say that that's one of the big things, is having that community of learners. I would say, yeah, the big data frame coding, I would say the scalable analytics setup that we had, is something that I think is actually very, very kind of challenging to find online. I don't think there's many resources online that will teach something like that. And same thing with those niche courses as well. I would say, UC San Diego is a tremendous university. There are some incredible faculty who are like absolute leaders of their fields, and doing research there. And their kind of insights and experience, if you can find a way to take courses that really operate in their research realms, going to office hours where you can hear them kind of talk about different things like this. These are the kinds of experiences that you really won't be able to get online. So for instance, I'll give one anecdote if I have 2 minutes. I took an applied genomics technologies class, which was taught by a professor who's actually a leader in the field of developing like genomic software. And so, I think, and then I was one of like 5 people who showed up to that class. I sat in there every day and just asked questions on questions on questions on questions. And I asked so many questions. And that is an experience which is impossible to replicate in an online course environment. And so I would say really take advantage of the fact that, you can really have conversations and talk to faculty who are the leaders of their fields.
Excellent advice. I hope everybody takes a piece of that with them today. I would like to thank you, Karthik, for spending your evening with us and providing such insightful tips and stories and advice. And it's been great. And anybody on the chat, if you're interested in, if you've got more questions, feel free to reach out to Karthik on LinkedIn. I imagine.
Yes.
And yeah, just thank you all for being here, and hope to see you at another alumni spotlight in winter quarter. All right, everybody, have a good night. Thank you again, Karthik.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me. I'll see you all later.